Hello, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours FM. I'm your host, Carrie Dills, and you are about to hear episode number 69 with Ben Furfie, who hails from the other side of the pond. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. It's the end of the day, and it's nearly the end of the week, so I can't complain.
Excellent. And I saw that you're enjoying a tasty beer. Which one?
Tiger. I just figured drinking beer, Mike Hemberger did it. It's a good way to look on the show. So
You know what? If Mike does it, it's totally legit. Well, since I'm having a British guest on, I'm having tea for this episode.
Yeah. So I'm just ruining it. I could have refilled my tea, but beer.
Nah, that time of night, grab yourself a cold one. Okay, so we'll get started here in a second, but first I would like to thank this episode's sponsors. We have got a desktop server brought to you by the folks over at ServerPress. That is the easiest way to develop with WordPress locally. You can check them out over at serverpress.com. They've got a free, their free product is actually excellent. But if you bump over to the premium, then you can get some extra features like live deployment. And then we also have DreamHost. Our friends over there make a product called DreamPress, which is a managed WordPress host. Lots of actually cool things I'll tell you about in a little bit at a very great price. You can check them out over at dreamhost.com/office hours. And so I said this was episode 69, and you may be wondering what happened to episode 68. Then you know what happened to episode 68 because it happened over the weekend. Genesis Camp, for those of you who are fans of the Genesis framework, they hosted their first ever live learning event, 24 hours of learning. It was pretty cool. And anyhow, I did a special edition of the podcast on there with Jenny Elliott and Shay Box. So you can head over to officehours.fm and catch the replay on that. Or even if you don't listen to it, just go and look at my the snapshot or whatever Google snapped is the preview for the video, and I'm making the stupidest face ever. It's pretty awesome. All right. All that said, welcome to everybody who's tuning in live. I'm very glad to have you here. And if you want to ask Ben some questions, you can just simply tag them with Office FM, and we'll take care of those. Or if you're listening over on Google Plus, you can use the Q&A app, and we will answer there. So, Ben, for folks that haven't seen you over on the UK Genesis podcast or haven't gotten a chance to meet you yet, why don't you introduce yourself?
So for those of you who live under a rock, because I'm always on the Facebook group, I'm always on the Twitter, I'm always on Slack. I do work. I promise you I do work.
Whatever, you're sitting there drinking a beer.
Yeah, exactly. It's 7 o'clock here, so I've got to stop working sometime. I am predominantly a front-end developer, but I also dabble in design, as some people have hired me to do. I actually started my career as a journalist, and that's how I got into this. I was a technology journalist and just ended up dabbling with code in my spare time because I am actually that sad. And yeah, just ended up falling in love with the Genesis framework, and yeah, from there, that's how I got to where I am now.
And one of the things that we're going to deep dive in today, you recently shuttered the doors of your freelance agency and have gone to work for the man. I know a lot of the folks that listen to this show are either currently freelancing or aspire to make their living with freelancing. So I'm really curious to hear some of the reasons that you made that decision to move over, and what your I know that there's been some tremendous pros, so I look forward to hearing those as well. So what were you doing with your freelance? Can you describe a little bit of kind of the average project you would work on, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I tried to work mainly with small and medium-sized businesses, or sort of, I guess they'd fall under the small category in the US, because I think you guys classify anything up to 500 people as small, which is a big company over here. And yeah, just basically try to stay clear of e-commerce, just really focused on lead generation, websites. So building, sites that had a lot of information, lead capture, sort of ability to create blog content. So I work with all kinds of clients from IT companies to aerial installers for sort of universities and hotels, printers. It did tend to stick more to the sort of technology side, but I did do some stuff for people like recruiters. I did some outsourcing work for some agencies where I got to work on some pretty cool kids-focused consumer brand stuff, which was a little bit different to what I normally did, but it was an interesting challenge. And yeah, that was pretty much what I worked on, sort of custom Genesis-based or WordPress-based websites.
Do you feel like you had your groove where, I mean, business was steady, business was good, or was it more of kind of a feast and famine?
It could be feast and famine. A lot of the time, there was a point where I really seriously injured my knee last year during a soccer accident. I couldn't walk for 4 months, so I couldn't actually get out to networking meetings and that type of thing, and that really put me back in terms of my business. I sort of couldn't follow up on various leads. Small businesses tend to prefer dealing with people that they can meet face to face and sort of build that trust up. And I found that really had quite a bit of an impact. And then there were other times where it was, through me not having the processes in place, I'm holding my hands up and being honest, projects dragged out way too long. One project, which I'm wrapping up this week, has been going on now for just over a year, which...
Holy cow!
Yeah, it kills your workflow when you sort of have various things. And there's been projects in the last couple of months that have suffered as a direct result of projects that I've not managed the workflow on, and I've had to apologize to people because it's impacted their work, and that's unfair. But that's down to me not managing, sort of these clients. And it's one of those amazing things. You go to work in a company. Obviously, I'd worked in the media before in a corporate environment, but I'd never worked in web design in a corporate environment. And it's one of those things, you go into somewhere else and you see what their processes is, or what their processes are, says the journalist, completely getting their grammar wrong. And it's like a light bulb coming on. You just go, why didn't I do that? Oh no, I can't believe I didn't, that's such a simple thing to do. But obviously, not working in that environment, you sometimes don't find out about those things. And, sort of, it's been one of those situations where I've wished that I could go back and maybe change a couple of things, but that's how it's gone.
Interesting. Thanks for the honesty and what you just shared, because it's hard to we're not perfect, and freelancing is definitely, there's a learning curve on in all aspects, from project management to the finances to the whole ball of wax. So thank you for sharing your experience there. I wanted to back up to the part where you had said your alleged soccer injury.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was probably you were drinking beer and slipped, or
God, no. Some people have seen the state of what my knee was like. We were playing indoors on a wooden surface, and it was the middle of summer. It was actually coming up to a year ago in less than a month. And we'd been playing for over an hour. And if you fell over, you left a lovely big sweat patch on the floor. I won't say what was leaving the sweat patches, but I'll let people's imaginations and sort of work out that bit. And one of my friends, I went in for the ball. was basically had my right leg out, my left leg was in the air. My other friend came in to challenge me. He, 18 stone, slipped on the sweat, completely lost all, all traction on the floor. Hit me, I heard a pop, went to the floor, banged my head in the wall. I thought, my head, that's what's going to be hurt, if anything. Like, sort of sat there for a minute, got my composure, had one of my friends try to help me up, and as I got up, it literally felt like my knee was going like that, and just that was when it was like, no, this isn't good, not good at all. So went to the hospital, and after probably about 8 weeks of waiting for my knee to stop, the swelling in my knee to go down, they found out that I'd torn my ACL and completely torn my ACL and partially torn my MCL. So quite a serious injury. So great, isn't it? People say exercise is good for you.
Not in your case. Steer clear of, yeah. Okay, well, you mentioned that kept you from getting out and doing networking, which is interesting. Were most of your clients then locally based, or was that important to you for getting work to do that in-person networking?
It wasn't the first time I'd freelanced. I had freelanced as a journalist slash copywriter back in 2009, right at the height of the recession, and I hadn't done the networking, and I found it very difficult to, even within the existing network of people that I had, there really wasn't that much business going around, but there was still quite a bit of business going around in the copywriting space. And because I didn't make those connections and get out there and introduce myself, it was very much a case of people didn't know me, people didn't trust me, and because people were so cautious with their money, understandably at the time, they weren't really willing to take a chance and were basically betting on known quantities. So when I came back, it was very much a case of, I'm going to go freelance, I'm going to go and join the local chamber of commerce, I'm going to go to their networking events, meet local business people. And, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say, hey, I went there, and the first time I went there, I got business. I didn't. It took about 8 months. But as people will say, people buy from people, they don't buy from businesses. So you need to build up that trust, but once you get that trust and you start getting referrals being passed around, you're not just going to get business from the people in the room. They're going to refer the people that they know to you. And that was where a lot of my business came from, and they really liked the fact that I wasn't this developer thousands of miles away who they could only reach by phone. Heaven forbid something happened, they could come down the road and beat me up. It wasn't that far to drive to get me to.
They could break your other knee.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think they really did like that, and I know that a lot of people, sort of really said that was one of the crucial things, that I not only understood what their requirements were. It wasn't just saying you want a website. It was, your existing website. For example, with a recruiter that I worked with, it was a technical recruiter. They did a lot of oil and gas engineering recruitment. Their existing website was very heavy. It wasn't mobile responsive. And basically the site I designed for them was very light on graphics. It was very much vector and SVG. Looked professional, but it meant that somebody on an oil rig in the North Sea on a really crappy edge connection could load the site quickly. And obviously, if somebody's looking for a job, you're not meant to be looking for a job on an oil rig. So, it's that type of thing. They can quickly look and not have to worry about getting caught. I know it sounds silly, but it was that simple thing that they were like, you were the only person who sort of really dove deep into what the issues were. But obviously, not every client can be justified in terms of taking that much time to deep dive. That was probably about $3,000 for their website. If I was working on a client that was £500, so about $750. There's no way I'd spend that much time on the proposal. It would be, what are you looking for? Why is your current website not, up to scratch? Why are you after a new website? And then go from there rather than deep diving.
Did you ever want to not do those small projects then, so that you could focus on those larger ones where you got to utilize your skill as a consultant?
I would have quite happily worked on any size project on the condition that I knew the client would get the bloody content in on time and not drag their feet. I will work on any project. And that's what I really like about the place that I'm working now. Sort of just to jump ahead in the conversation, they have a very clear process where they have a deadline to turn around the mock-ups and turn around the websites. But the thing that triggers that deadline isn't triggered until the client sends the content over. So there are clients I've been working on this week who have been customers of this company for over a year, but because they haven't got the content over to them, nothing's happened, and they've got no recourse to complain. So it's one of those things. I think, sort of one of the big things that I would like, because obviously I can't necessarily, and I don't really want to be freelancing. I'm going to appreciate the time that I have. But one thing that I know I would really love to do is there's 1,000,001 blogs out there that talk about, developer workflows, designer workflows, and they're all about the tools. One of the only blogs out there that I've really seen that sort of really dives into the part that's important, and that's how you make money is, sort of you've got Kurtz McHale, you've got Chris Lemmer, and they're rare. And I think that those type of blogs that are focused on the business aspects, but then also focus very much on, sort of with a technical web tinge, are incredibly valuable to, sort of people who, like me, have never worked in an agency and so don't actually, know how things work.
Yes, +1 for both of those gentlemen's blogs. They have excellent content on the business side of things. We're getting some great questions in, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order, so forgive me for those who are tuning in. But Ben asked, so going back when you're talking about this client that you got to spend the additional time with or do the deep dive, he asked, how did you know whether a client was worth the deep dive or not? Was that purely based on the budget they had to spend?
It was a couple of things. Gut was one part. You could just tell some people ran a business because they couldn't be employed elsewhere. And those were the type of people that you wanted to avoid doing too much for. I was quite happy to take their money and deliver them something that would, essentially deliver them a return on investment. But I didn't really want to develop a long-term relationship with them because they're the archetypal clients from hell. Another thing was, I don't know if there's a similar type of thing in the US, but in the UK, because I work predominantly with public or private limited companies, so I think it's just a limited company in the US, you have to file your accounts with Companies House, which is the government sort of department that handles limited or registered companies. And within that, you can actually see what their assets are, what their liabilities are, what their sort of balance sheet is essentially, and looking at that and sort of working out, this is a company that is struggling, or this is a company that is cash rich. It sort of makes you think. I think that they've potentially got wiggle room for longer term relationships in terms of these are guys who will be able to afford, a content strategy package or a blogging package or a SEO package, sort of that type of thing. And it's really just looking at that and trying to work out, can they afford it, or if they can't, I'll build them a website, but I'm not going to spend too much time digging in the other areas.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for elaborating on that. Jackie asked a great question. She says, if you could change one thing you did while freelancing for your business, what would it be?
That is a very good question. Ooh, I would probably be much more strict with what I actually offered to clients. I think there were too many times where I was relatively new. I knew that portfolios are crucial to, sort of getting more business in a sense, and I would end up spending far too much time um, on small websites trying to make these things portfolio pieces, and it would slow down my workflow, it would slow down, the number of referrals that would come back in. And it's one of these things. If somebody's only paying a couple $100 for a website, it should literally be a case of taking something like the enterprise theme, dropping in a couple of images, dropping in some text, and sending them over either a screenshot that you've done in browser, or a PSD or sketch version of the template, and sending it over for them to approve. And if they come back and say, oh, I want to change this, or can we move that, just saying, no, it's not within the remit of what you've paid. If you want to do that, we can look at it, but it will cost you more. And sort of really get to the point where you're quite strict. I'd have probably, in all honesty, I'd have probably paid for a virtual assistant to do the customer service as well, because I think as developers, we're not salespeople. We're not that hardened, I'm going to get the sale at any cost. We do this because we actually care about, what we're putting out. And I think you need to have that separation where you can essentially say to somebody else, can you call this customer and say it's not within the remit of what they've paid for, so that you're not potentially souring the relationship that you have. It's essentially that person who is calling has no sort of ability to go, oh yeah, no problem, I'll kowtow to what you want. They're repeating what they've been told and taking back the feedback from the client. So, it's one of those things. I think I've said to people, I'm not really interested in freelancing, but if I was going to, at the very least, I would be looking to partner with somebody who can do the sales, and not go it alone next time. Actually have that clear separation in roles.
That's golden wisdom right there, to bring in other people, first to be able to recognize in yourself what it is you excel at and what it is that you could stand to pass off, and then actually being willing to bring in, something like a VA. I've kind of thought about that myself. No, so cool. Know thyself. I like it. We have got, let's see, Devender wants to know about your new job profile. So now you're what's the name of the company that you're working with now?
It's a company called EMS.
EMS.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you were in the U.S., that would be an ambulance service.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was searching for their websites that they've done recently, and it kept on coming, emergency medical services. I was like, yeah, no, it's not going to find that.
So what is your role there?
So they have been around since 1999, I believe. So their job titles are still stuck very much in the late 90s. So although my job title or official job title is senior web designer, I'm actually more of a senior front-end developer. I don't really do any design. We actually have graphic designers for that. And really what they've brought me in for is to work on their larger clients. So they have clients like Reebok, as well as a couple of large local sports teams, and a couple of other big clients who, do you know what, I can't remember who they are. So it's one of those things where I've, sort of been brought in partly to help them they did a little bit of WordPress stuff in the past, but they've never really sort of gone. They're very much a Drupal house, and they're keen to be able to offer people the option to have a WordPress website for companies that have already got people who are experienced with WordPress and, don't are going to push back against being told that they need to retrain on a new system. Obviously, behind the scenes, Drupal and WordPress, in terms of usability, are pretty similar. But in terms of code, they're night and day. Not that people necessarily understand that. So,
well, that's okay. I thought so. Joe Waltham tweeted, "How's learning Drupal?" And I thought she was just being a troll, but apparently there is some Drupaling going on.
I will be learning how to Drupal, purely and simply so that when there is more demand for that particular area, I can jump in. Like I said, I'm going to be senior, so I'm not going to be working on many of the small projects, from what I understand. But despite that, there are going to be times where I need to jump in, so I need to be able to pull my weight. And to be honest, I'm looking forward to learning it because, although, yeah, Drupal is maybe not as good as WordPress is at the moment, it shifts and twists. I mean, once Drupal 8 comes out, who knows, there might be things in that are better than what WordPress handle areas in. But, it's always good to expand your horizons and see how the other side do things, because it can make you go, oh, you know what, that's brilliant. I'll develop a WordPress plugin that actually gives you that functionality, So, yeah, I haven't actually ended up doing much Drupal coding yet. I've got a list of recommendations of things to look at. But I did manage to get Drupal working on desktop server. So, which took a little bit of twisting and doing things that I don't think Mark particularly designed the app to do, but it works. And you can spin up, you can create Drupal blueprints. So it's not, you might have to go in and twiddle a couple of things in the database, but if you can benefit from it. Haven't tried deploying yet. That's going to be the interesting bit. But obviously, Drupal do offer a similar local host thing, but it's only really it's like MAMP. It doesn't really have the deployment stuff. So that's obviously the deployments and the blueprints are where desktop server really excels. So it'd be interesting to see whether the Drupal hack works essentially.
Interesting. Okay, well, Mark, if you're listening, you'll have to get together with Ben and figure out what he's how he's hacking desktop server for Drupal. So Drupal runs then on PHP and MySQL, same as WordPress.
Yeah. It's purely, I think, a lot of getting it to work is just that. Obviously, when you spin up a desktop server instance, it spins it up with a WP config file. So you've just got to sort of copy out the database information and just put it over. So I think when you spin it up normally, it doesn't always quite work. I've had to create a blueprint, and using the WP config file, it manages to pull it out. But I need to do more testing to see whether there's a security or database issue with that. So we'll see what happens. It might work, it might not, but.
Interesting. Well, you think that would make a very interesting blog post on the other side of things. And I know WordPress folks, we like to jab Drupal and Joomla developers, and I'm sure they probably like to jab us back. But I think you're right that there is definitely some value to be had in seeing how other people go about solving similar problems, and get you thinking about things in a little bit different way. Yeah. Since we're already talking on desktop server, I will take a moment to expound on it just a little bit. So earlier so as Ben mentioned, you can do these things called blueprints, which is basically where you imagine all the things that you do when you normally set up a WordPress install. So you go to the settings and you make sure that it's searchable by or indexable. You change your permalink structure. You might have a handful of plugins that you always like to use, whatnot. So you set up your perfect WordPress install, and then you save it as a blueprint. And then the next time you go to create a site, you can use that blueprint, and you've just saved yourself from having to do all those initial config items again. So pretty cool. So
billable hours.
What's that?
Cut down on the billable hours.
Yes. Or just, no hours. We're getting away from billable hours. We're charging based on our value.
Of course, yeah. Oh no, I'm talking about internal billable hours.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that was
never
probably
ever think that value pricing gets rid of the internal billable hour. You still have a price that you cost your company.
true,
The client
but
doesn't know that.
well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm still kind of working out the value pricing in my head.
Mm.
But regardless,
Oh,
I guess I've been using it for a couple of years. Yeah. So, and they host a lot of WordCamps too. So if you ever get the chance to meet Mark or Greg in person, go bug them and get them to demo Desktop Server 4.0 for you. It's pretty cool. And while I'm talking about sponsors, I'm sorry, Ben. We're just going to keep on going. We're rolling with it.
Yeah.
I
worked in the media. It's all about advertisers.
Well, and I really do appreciate the folks who generously sponsor this show, and I don't want to make these. I want to put products in front of you that are actually interesting to the listeners, and not just Carrie's doing a commercial break, because I appreciate that that people even tune in. So it's important to me to get sponsors that are in line with things you'd like to hear about. So that said, so Dream Press 2, I'm going to actually read because because I can't memorize all of this. But with the account, it's $19.95 a month. You get 30 gigs of SSD storage, up to 2.1 million monthly visitors. And holy cow, if you're having that many visitors, well, I want to know what your secret is. Auto-scaling RAM, automatic WordPress install, unlimited email addresses, 24/7 WordPress support. They've got a control panel. It's not a standard cPanel. It's their own custom control panel. And you're hosted on virtual private servers and isolated MySQL servers. So do check them out if you're looking for another hosting plan. If you're like me, you've got hosting plans, websites scattered all over the web. I was about to... Never mind. You know what? I'm just really glad that my brain, there's no movie camera inside of it that projects the thoughts that go through my head on the wall. Anyhow, you can check them out at dreamhost.com/office hours. So thank you. Thank you for that. Ben, how are you doing over there?
I'm absolutely great.
I like to hear it. Okay, so we've got some more questions.
One from Jackie. So did your freelancing and podcasting help you land that job? No, absolutely. To some extent, possibly, yeah. In terms of actually getting discovered for the job, no, not in the slightest. How I was actually speaking to Ben earlier today about this. The way that I actually got discovered was LinkedIn, and I've gotten business through LinkedIn actually in the past. Just people looking for local WordPress developers, and yeah, probably even now I get maybe 2-3 emails from recruiters every week asking if I'm available. Obviously the answer is now no, but yeah, so I had one, was it last week, who basically just, the company's somebody I used to work with works for that company, so they sort of vouched for me and said, yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. Said, job's yours, you just got to pass the test. It was for AngularJS job, which I can do AngularJS. It wasn't just being offered randomly. And yeah, this was a job in Berlin, Germany. So yeah, my days of being an expat are behind me, so there was no question that I was going to take that one. But yeah, so it's definitely, I think possibly public speaking made me very interesting to the company, purely and simply because not many developers are particularly confident in front of close, sort of large groups of people. So being able to have a developer who is comfortable talking to large groups of clients and making something simple there's a little bit more trust than sort of having a salesperson up in front of everyone talking about that type of thing. So, you know, that aspect might have helped, but it wasn't the reason why I was hired.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so the moral of the story is keep that LinkedIn profile updated.
Just stick front-end developer in your job title. You know, that's what they're looking for.
Can I, okay, this is just a random aside, but a pet peeve about LinkedIn, you know, people follow you on Twitter. That's fine. It's kind of, it's impersonal. People, you know, friend request you on Facebook and you look and see who your common friends are and, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. I get random people trying to connect with me on LinkedIn. And they just send out the default, hey, I'd like to connect with you or whatnot. And I just immediately delete those. I'm like, if you can't be bothered to remind me how it is that I should know you and we should be connected, then.
A tip to recruiters, don't do that. Just, you know, I will add you if you are a recruiter, but just be honest. Just say, hey, I'm a recruiter. I'm interested in connecting with you purely and simply because if there are any opportunities that come up, I'd love to be able to reach out and get in touch. That's fine. I will accept that. I'm quite happy to. But if you're some randomer and I'm much more or less forgiving with adding people than what I used to be when I was a journalist, because obviously there were people who wanted to connect with me or, you know, could have interesting things to talk about. And in that case, yeah, not a problem. But these days I'm much more, you know, sort of strict with who I add. Obviously, if you're in the Genesis community, feel free to add me. But
I've been at my request for you to add me has been hanging out there for months. I just figured you were rejecting me. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't even know if we're connected on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But if we're not, we can remedy that. All right. So you talked about or have alluded to some of the benefits of being employed versus self-employed. What's kind of your number one, like, this is a relief?
Well, this is as much of a relief to my other half, Vicky, as it is to me. I really wish there was like a Workaholics Anonymous because I'm like my dad. You know, I am a massive workaholic, and given the opportunity, I will work 7 days a week from the minute I get out of bed till the minute I go to bed, and I don't necessarily get tired from it. I do absolutely love it. I'm the type of person who, while Vicky is watching something like The Good Wife or Pretty Little Liars on Netflix, I'll be sat there with my iPad or my MacBook Air, you know, hammering away at Treehouse courses, you know, and enjoying it because I was the school kid who would get a geography book at the beginning of term and take it home and read it cover to cover and just absorb that information, and then annoy people when we got to the very end of the term and we'd have a multiple choice as part of our yours. I want to say SATs. Is that your high school diploma? Yeah. So over here, you've got GCSEs, which happen at 16 and at A levels. And at my GCSE in geography, I get like out of 16 in my geography stuff just because I was absorbing it. Sadly, coursework wasn't my strong point. But anyway, that's a complete aside. It was very much a case of I would, you know, sort of just I'll sit there and I'll work, learn, given any opportunity, and working in an environment like that where there's a 40-minute commute, it creates a separation between work and between rest, and I actually need that because I will work until literally Vicky's like, I'm going to bed now. I'm like, all right, I'll be there in a minute. And to be honest, that as much as I can do that, it is unhealthy. It's been unhealthy for my weight. My knee being injured didn't help, but I probably have put quite a bit of weight on in the last year, an unhealthy amount. And that's largely being desk bound. You know, it's one of these things. It's, you know, having those boundaries and being able to say that I start at 9:30. There's an enforced 15-minute break in the morning. There's an enforced 15-minute break in the afternoon and 40 minutes for lunch. And if you get caught coming back to your desk before that 40 minutes is up, you get in trouble. Is really good for me because it's just a case of, you know, I there's not that thing of sitting playing on my Xbox and going, I could be getting on with that. Why am I wasting time doing this? There's no wasting time because I don't have to do it or I haven't got anything to do. So that's probably the best thing. Second, sort of related to being paid regularly, which is a lovely thing. Just knowing that.
Who doesn't like to be paid regularly?
No, it's just knowing that that paycheck is going into my bank account at the end of the month and I don't have to worry about it. Is not having to chase clients. You know, as everyone who has worked freelance will attest to, chasing clients is horrific. Chasing the government for money is easier to get blood out of a stone, to be entirely honest, especially when it's a grant funding. I've just had £6,000 paid into my account in terms of money that was owed 3 months ago. You know, if that had been the company I'm working for now that had had that problem, it wouldn't have been an issue. My salary would have been paid in, but I've had to take a pay cut for these last couple of months while that money was outstanding because that's a huge chunk of work. And not having to worry about that type of thing is, you know, I'm not that old, but I'm getting grey hairs, and it's not a good sign. So,
okay.
Two things.
Awesome. Well, the work-life balance is hugely important, and I think a lot of freelancers struggle with being able to shut down the computer, step away on, you know, and just sort of enjoy actual real life. You mentioned chasing down clients, and that made me think there is this girl on Twitter. She's actually a real human being, but she's also on Twitter. Her name is Julie Elster. So if you look on Twitter at Julie_Elster, and her profile is, "What do you do when a client hasn't paid? Just tell Julie. I'll make polite calls on your behalf using the thermonuclear niceness, and you get paid." And I just had to.
Would you like a broken leg?
Yeah, she calls and she's the bad cop and gets your money. So I thought that was interesting.
Well worth the money. You know,
yes.
Like I said, it goes back to what I said before. Sometimes we don't like chasing people because we don't want to sour that relationship in case, you know, they don't end up giving us a referral. Get around that by making somebody else. Get around that by having your accounts department call them up and say, you owe us this money. People are not bothered when accounts departments contact them and say, you owe us money. They are when the person who they're dealing with directly does. Strange, isn't it? You know, it's like, but, you know, it's one of those things. People are scared of accounts departments. They're also scared of lawyers. So find a lawyer client, do a website, and then do free SEO for them, and you know, get them to send out legal letters for free. That's a hate lawyer.
See, I'd be worried that they'd turn around and sue me for, I don't know, something.
That's what you have a lawyer client for.
We have a fantastic question from Matt. He says, what have you learned from the sales end of things since starting this new job? And does that translate into any advice for developers promoting their products?
It's difficult because I haven't really, the sales guys sit on a different floor, which is a beautiful thing, because when I was a journalist, the sales guys sat on the same floor, and I swear there was one time where I literally turned around to one of the senior sales guys and said, if you don't stop walking around this department, you're disturbing my journalists. I will take that mobile phone and I will shove it so far up your, that every time someone rings, you will get very excited, let's just say as a euphemism. I think, and obviously you've got to be careful because obviously I'm working for the man and there are contract regulations of what I can and can't say. But I think the crucial thing that I've sort of glimpsed is having a clear process and explaining that to the client. And just from something that I've done, I mean, I will hold my hands up again. You know, one of the things that I could be terrible at is if I got behind on something, you know, because I was so determined to get through it and actually catch back up, I sometimes wouldn't, I'd go dark. And I think that a lot of the time that's what happens. It's not that developers are hiding from people, it's that they're that focused on trying to get stuff done and avoiding distractions that they just don't take calls. Having someone whose job solely is to contact people when there's a query is a great thing. That's not necessarily the job of a salesperson. One thing, there's a tool out there.
I thought maybe there were ants in your underwear.
No. This is somebody actually to approach for to be a sponsor on the show, Carrie. They are absolutely phenomenal. It's a company called Silktide. People might have come across their tools like Sitebeam and Nibbler, but they recently released a new tool called Haystack, and it's a phenomenal tool for finding really simple, low-hanging fruit. Maybe not strictly relevant for, say, someone like Matt, who has a product business, but if you do anything like social or small business websites, it's a tool that you can find particular types of businesses in local areas. So you might look for florists in New York, and it'll bring up the top 10 results, and then you can actually run tests against each other, and they'll tell whether they've got a Facebook page, whether they've got a Twitter page, whether their site is mobile responsive, what the score of their website is. And it's just a great tool for being able to, you know, sort of go out to that customer and say, hey, look, we've been doing a research into your market, and we found that, you know, you're great in this. It always start with what they're doing well, or it just makes people feel better.
Interesting. Silktide.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the company. Yeah. So start with what they're doing. So say, yeah, it's great that you got a Facebook page. It's great that you got this. But we've noticed that your website isn't actually mobile responsive, and because of that, if somebody's out and about, and you know, make a joke. If it's a florist, say, you know, obviously if they've done something wrong and they need to find somewhere to buy flowers to make it up to their wife, you know, you're not going to appear at the top. You know, what we can do is we can do a really simple conversion to make your website mobile responsive. It'll cost X amount of dollars. Is that something that you'd be interested in? You know, it's that type of thing, because one thing that I think a lot of people forget, and you know, it's the type of thing that I learned having worked in other industries where when you win a client, it's all about starting them off on a small package and then building up trust and then getting them up to those packages that are several £1,000s or several $1,000s. You know, you're not going to go jumping straight into that. It's a great tool for finding that, and yeah, you know, anybody who's looking for a way to, you know, sort of find low-hanging fruit, that's a great tool to look at.
Cool. Well, we've got some questions over in Google Plus. I'm gonna pop over there and grab those. She comments, thanks, Ben, you give me hope. My question is, how did you wean your past clients off your plate while taking on a new job? That's a great question.
That is a really good question. I was very fortunate that many were coming up to their 12-month renewal, and so I just basically explained that I was going to be winding down the company, that I was still going to be around if there was an issue, but that I recommend you, you know, sort of go to, if you want a company that specializes in maintenance, someone like WP Site Care, or if you want somebody in the UK, then, you know, sort of pointing them in the direction of a couple of, you know, people who I know from the UK Genesis stuff. And yeah, I think that's the crucial thing. You know, there's a saying, don't burn bridges. because you'll never know when you need to cross them again.
Yep.
And I think that's a crucial thing. Just because they're not going to be your customer anymore, and just because they're not going to be working with you directly, doesn't mean that when you go freelance again, they're not the best people to go to and say, hey, I've gone freelance again, I'm sort of building my business back up. Do you know of anybody who's looking for a website? If you've taken care of them and put them onto somebody good, they'll quite happily still refer people onto you.
Love that. That is golden advice right there. We have another one from Dave over in the Google Q&A. He says, I missed the beginning of the interview, so apologize if this has been covered. And Dave spells apologize with an S, so I know he's one of your UK buddies. He said, since you've been at the new agency, any workflow lessons you've learned, like in terms of maybe how they manage their projects or?
Yeah. So as I said earlier on, one of the things that they do is they assign deadlines for when the site has to be turned around, but they don't. That deadline is not triggered until the client has supplied content and images, which I think is probably the best way of handling it once they supply the images. If they're taking more than 3 months, I think they then have a content team who they refer them onto and say, hey, look, it's obvious that you're not going to be able to, you're struggling to find the time to produce this content. We have a content team, we have content packages, would you like to speak to somebody about that? And this is the company I work for now is like 90 people, and it's going to double in the next 2 years. You can't do that as a freelancer. So the number one thing is go to WordCamps. You will find copywriters there, and just literally get up in a lightning talk and hijack it. Say, just a question, who's a copywriter? And then literally do it as a community thing. But just basically make a note of all the copywriters and basically go and round them up and get their cards. Because if you can basically say to a client, look, you're obviously struggling with this content, we can help you out, pass them on to a copywriter, get it back. It removes the roadblock. And even if you take £100 out or $200 out of your budget that you've been given by that client to get the content, it's better to do that, take the hit and get the website out the way than it be on your books where it's interrupting other projects.
So what I just heard was hijack WordCamps.
Not that way.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, good stuff. Devender would like to know, other than Drupal, is there any particular skill set or language that you're hoping to learn at this job?
So, as I said, one of the things I've been brought in is because of my experience with WordPress. One that I am, they have an app team within the company. I think there's about 30 people who work on that. It's a big app company. It's not necessarily that I'd love to go into app development, although that is something that I would love to sort of dabble in. What I'm really interested in is ways of using the REST API within WordPress and combining it with a front-end JavaScript framework like Angular or Ember to sort of really build something that isn't possible, or is possible with PHP, but you're removing the confines of having a server-based language where it's got to send a request and process it on the server and send it back. Instead of doing that, actually sending the heavy lifting over to your browser. So that's the difference. That's why JavaScript is quicker than PHP, because it's processed locally. And sort of really diving into that and finding ways of using that within client projects to sort of create a niche for myself. I mean, that's going to be the way it goes anyway. I think realistically in 5 years' time, all right, it might only be like 25% of WordPress websites are built with sort of JavaScript front ends, and that is me pulling a figure out of the air. I don't know. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. But I do think a significant chunk will be developed with JavaScript. So I think that's going to be, sort of an area to look at, and it's something that's really interesting to me. It's something different. There are different use cases for it. So it's really just a case of expanding on what I've already started diving into with JavaScript frameworks and building upon that.
That's another benefit of being employed right there, is that you can learn on someone else's dime.
Yeah, get paid for it. Yeah.
Yes. So we've got just a few minutes left here together. So if you have a question for Ben, you best to get it in now. Before we wrap up, though, I did want to mention a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, the time flies, I opened up a survey for Office Hours listeners, and it's over at officehours.fm/survey. And I've had about 20 folks take it so far. So thank you to everyone who's done that. And basically just trying to figure out who's tuning in so that I can continue to hone content and find guests that are the most interesting and can serve you best. So if you would take a moment, I would greatly appreciate that. And then if you're not getting reminders for the podcast and would like to, you can just do that over at officehours.fm/subscribe. Okay, so
this could go on for another 2 hours. Another benefit when you're on somebody else's dime.
Oh, nice. Well, then, since you'll let me carry on, I would love to thank Texas or TXG Spice for the kind 5-star review over on iTunes. I really appreciate anytime someone drops off in a little word of encouragement there. So thank you, TXG Spice. Love the handle there. Okay, so Ben, we are not. I don't have any more questions. So from the audience. So that means that you get to say whatever you want to say.
That's a dangerous.
You're not bound by the questions.
That's dangerous. There are many things I saw on Imgur today that are not appropriate for this, but were very funny. If you, I suppose probably what I'd say is related to, why I made the leap from being freelance to going into employment. Don't be afraid to actually make that jump. Not freelance, like Curtis McKell says, freelancing isn't right for everyone. You've got to have a mindset. And while I'm good at it, I enjoyed it. There are various things that are detrimental. I haven't seen my friends much since I started freelancing, which is a byproduct of me living, sort of famous, drive away from them as well. But equally, the amount of time that I've had off in the evenings has meant that it's just not worth, me driving over there to see them for 20 minutes and come back. I love them, but 20 minutes drive, 20 minutes with them is not, it's not enough time. So, if you feel that, sort of you are struggling, that you've got the stress of money being, feast and famine, don't feel like you're failing if you go back to working for someone. The reality is that you do development or you do design because you love doing development or doing design. And people say, one of the amazing things about being freelance is that you get to choose your clients. But that's not always the case. You've got to take clients that you don't enjoy working with. And if they're people that you don't enjoy working with because they have a poor attitude or, they cause you issues. If you work for someone, invariably it's very rare that you're going to have to deal with those complaints. They'll have, processes in place so that the developers and the designers aren't dealing with those people directly. And it's just nice to be able to go in, do your hours, get things done, get paid for doing ultimately something that you still love doing, and then have a couple of hours in the evening or, like what I do. My girlfriend Vicky loves sleeping in, whereas I'm an early riser. So Saturday morning, I get up about 7 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't get up until about 10 o'clock. So I've got that 3 hours in the morning where I can go and do Treehouse, code a little bit of stuff. And, you know, just it gives you the ability to do that rather than, let's face it, if you have that time and you are, you know, working freelance, you're probably going to use that time to work. It's not healthy. So, you know, and let's face it, office banter is some of the best banter. So, you know, it's not a bad thing. So you know.
That's what Slack and Twitter are for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a great one. Two of the designers who basically had Apple the earphones, and you know, like how teenage girls have them in one ear and they share them. The project manager, she basically popped up over the dividers and went, "What the are you two doing? You know, are you?" I was like, "You look like a bunch of teenage girls listening to like, you know, pop music in, like, you know, a playground," and it was brilliant, you know. But it's that type of little stuff that you miss within Slack, and you know, that type of thing. But yeah, so yes, it's I definitely feel like I made the right decision. We'll see what I think in a year's time, but.
Awesome. Well, I'll have to have you back on the show for a recap to see a year in the life of an employed man.
Yeah.
What happened next? All right, Ben. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I very much appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to join us. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked some great questions. And look forward to seeing everybody next week. Cheers.
Bye.